Hello everyone, let us take up the last point under the drug induced toxicity, that is neurotoxicity. Now before going into the actual toxic effects on the nervous system, as the name implies, neurotoxicity is the toxicity towards the nervous system. Okay, so let us brief over about the nervous system. Okay, now this nervous system, it comprises of a complicated network of a number of neurons as well as the supporting tissues, okay, which are known as neuroglia. Okay, so it is a highly complex system comprising of billions of neurons. Okay, we will come to what neurons are, what neuroglia are exactly. Okay, so basically this nervous system, it is divided into two types, that is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system known as the CNS, okay, that is central nervous system. It comprises of the brain and the spinal cord. Then the peripheral nervous system, it is divided into three main systems, that is a somatic nervous system, an autonomic nervous system and the enteric nervous system, depending upon where exactly it is supplying. Now coming to the functions of the nervous system, this nervous system, it carries out three main functions, that is the sensory, integrative and the motor function. Okay, sensory function is to sense the thing or the situation. Okay, so your body will sense the input. Okay, just like your computer, it has an input, processor and output. The similar way this nervous system also carries out the similar type of function, that is it will sense the thing. Like for example, now when I'm speaking, you are listening to me. Okay, so that's the sensory part. You can hear something, then your brain will start processing as to what am I speaking or what am I explaining. Okay, so that is an integrative function. And the motor function, this integrative function is carried out by the central nervous system, that is your brain mainly. Okay, and the motor function, that is some output will be there, that is maybe if I ask you a question related, you will respond to it. Okay, so that's a motor function. So these are the three basic functions which are carried out by the nervous system. Now coming to the composition of the nervous system. Basically this nervous system, it is made up of the nervous tissue. Okay, so just like your different organs, they are made up of different types of tissue. So this nervous system, it basically comprises of the nervous tissue, and this nervous tissue has two types of cells, that is the neurons and the neuroglia. This is what we were talking about in the first slide. Okay, that is neurons and the neuroglia. Now let us see what are neurons and what are neuroglia. So neurons, as you all must be aware of, it is the basic functional unit which carries out most of the functions of the nervous system, that is the sensing or thinking, remembering, controlling your muscle activity or regulating the glandular secretions. So n number of functions which are carried out by the nervous system, these are mainly carried out by these neurons. Okay, so these are the functional units of your nervous system, you can call. So they are the ones which will basically carry all these signals from one place to another place. Okay, which will help in sensing or integrating the functions. Okay, then the next type of cell is the neuroglia. So neuroglia, it is also called as the supporting tissue of your nervous system. So this basically supports, nourishes and protects the neurons, which are actually carrying out most of the functions of the nervous system. So neuroglia basically help in supporting these cells or providing nutrition to them or protecting these neurons, and also maintains the interstitial fluid into which actually these neurons are present. Okay, so these are the two types of cells. Now coming to the neurons. Okay, so neurons, as I've told you, these are the ones which will basically carry out the main functions of your nervous system. So these neurons are also known as nerve cells. They possess a specialized property called as electrical excitability. That is, they can respond to a particular stimulus which they receive. So if there is any stimulus, may it be external or may it be an internal stimulus, it can be from any environment. Okay, so once it gets that stimulus, it can get converted into an action potential. There will be movement of some ions across the membrane. It will lead to the change in the potential across the membrane, and it will develop something called as an action potential. So this stimulus, it will bring some signal to that neuron, right, which will have to be transmitted maybe from one area to another area, okay, or to execute some type of say motor function. Okay, so it will carry that signal. So that signal, it is carried in terms of action potential across the neurons. Okay, now what is the stimulus? What is the meaning of stimulus? A stimulus is any change in the environment which is strong enough to initiate an action potential. Okay, so it should be able to generate an action potential. So for that, it has to cross a particular threshold level. We'll come to that when we actually look into the action potential. Okay, that is the nerve impulse. Okay, so this is basically an electrical signal which is propagating, that is, it is traveling along the surface of the membrane of your neuron. Okay, so now why this action potential is traveling across the membrane? How it is possible? It's made possible because of the movement of certain ions, mainly the sodium and the potassium. Okay, so they will move across the membrane. As a result of this, there will be a change in the membrane potential, and it will result in the generation of an action potential. Now this is what exactly an action potential will look like of a neuron. Now, as I've told you that there is a particular distribution of the ions across the membrane, right? Certain ions are present extracellularly, certain ions are present intracellularly. So a particular distribution is present which will stabilize that particular membrane at a particular potential, that is minus 70 millivolts. This is the resting potential of any neuronal membrane. Okay, now supposing if there is an stimulus, a particular stimulus is evoked over here. So what will happen? It will make certain ions to move across the membrane. Okay, so mainly the sodium ion channels are open. So as sodium ions, these are extracellular ions, they will move across the membrane and they will enter inside the cell. So as a result of movement of this positive charge from extracellular region to the intracellular region inside a neuron, it will execute a change in the potential, right? A charge is moving, so there will be a change in the potential. So slowly it will start moving towards a positive potential, right? From minus 70 it has moved to minus 55, say. So this particular minimum level which it has to cross, that is known as a threshold. So as I've told you earlier, the stimulus, it can evoke an action potential only when this minimum potential is crossed. So once this threshold is crossed, it will produce a rapid change in the potential across the membrane. More and more sodium ion channels will open and it will result in the depolarization phase. Okay, so a particular maximum level will be reached, and after that some other type of ion channels will open. So potassium ion channels will open. So as a result of this, the potassium ions will move out of the cell. So there is a positive charge which is moving out of the cell. So again the potential across the membrane will change as the positive charge is moving in the opposite direction. So it will result in the movement of the potential towards the negative side again, slowly, as the ion channels open. So this phase is known as repolarization phase. So as it drops down, it will come back to the resting membrane potential. Sometimes there is some additional opening of some additional potassium ion channels. It may result in hyperpolarization. That is, the potential will drop even below the resting membrane potential, that is known as the hyperpolarization, and eventually it will come back to the resting membrane potential, and it will may maintain till the next stimulus is generated. So this is how an action potential is evoked, and the signal which comes in the form of stimulus, it is converted into an action potential, and this action potential will be traveling to along with your neuron. Okay, now coming to the parts of the neuron. So basically neuron, it has three parts, that is a cell body, the dendrites, and an axon. Okay, so a single cell body will be present. Now cell body is this particular part. Okay, so as you can see that there are a number of organelles which are present over here, right? As you can see, normally the cell, it has several membrane bound organelles present within it, right? So similar type of organelles are also present in the cell body, which is also known as perikaryon or soma. So it contains a nucleus, this one, surrounded by the cytoplasm over here, and this also includes several organelles such as lysosomes, mitochondria, and Golgi complex. Okay, then the next part is the nerve fiber. Okay, so a nerve fiber, it is a term which is used to describe the processes or the extensions which are coming out from the cell bodies. Here you can see that there are a number of processes which are coming out, right? Now out of this, several processes are short, and there is only one process which is long, right? Okay, so depending upon this length, these nerve fiber or the processes, these are of two types, that is dendrites and axon. Multiple dendrites, meaning there are a number of dendrites, and there is only one long process, and that is known as an axon. Okay, now dendrites, these are actually the receiving points or the input portion. So here the impulse will be received by this particular neuron at these particular points, that is from the dendrites, and the signal will be carried along the axon. Okay, so this signal which is coming, these arrows indicate the movement of the impulse. So this is a long process which is known as an axon. So this stimulus will be traveling along the axon. Okay, so it will move towards maybe another muscle fiber or another neuron, or maybe a gland cell, or maybe whatever effector organ onto which it is producing the action. Now this axon, it is a longest process, right? And that's only one axon. So as you can see that this particular axon over here, it is surrounded by some specialized type of cells, right, at particular intervals. There are a number of cells which are wrapped around this particular axon, and this type of cell is known as the Schwann cell, which is wrapping around that particular axon at particular intervals. So there are a number of Schwann cells which are wrapped around the axon. Now such type of neuron, it is known as myelinated neuron. This is a myelin sheath with this which is created over here, okay, by the wrapping of the Schwann cell. Okay, and there are non-myelinated neurons also when the Schwann cells are absent. Only the bare neuron or the bare axon will be present, and at the gap in between these two Schwann cells, there is a small opening, right? So this particular opening where the axon is exposed, that particular point is known as the node of Ranvier, and terminal of this particular axon, it is branched in nature, right? So these are known as axon terminals, and the last portion is slightly bulb like structure, and that is known as synaptic and bulb. Okay, so this is to do with the structure of the neuron. Now when a particular signal is transmitted from one neuron to another neuron, okay, as I've told you, a signal may be transmitted from one neuron to another neuron, or from a neuron to an effector cell. So when one neuron it transfers its signal to another neuron. Actually, there is no physical contact between the two neurons. As you can see that this is the synaptic end bulb. There is one end bulb which is shown over here, as we have seen in the earlier picture, that these are the axon terminals. So this synaptic end bulb, it is shown over here. This is the one. Okay, as you can see that at the end it is bulb like structure. Okay, so that's why it is called as synaptic end bulb. So this particular synaptic end bulb, it is a part of the presynaptic neuron, and this is the second neuron to which it is sending the signal. This is the nerve impulse which is coming over here. So as a nerve impulse comes, there is no physical contact between these two neurons. This is the second neuron. This is the postsynaptic neuron. Now why it is called as a postsynaptic neuron is because in between these two neurons there is a gap called as the synapse. Okay, no two neurons are in physical contact with each other. It is known as a synapse, the gap, or it is also known as the synaptic cleft. So how the signal is carried from one neuron to another neuron? The nerve impulse, when it reaches this synaptic end bulbs, it will cause the release of certain chemicals. First of all, it will result in the inflow of the calcium ions through the voltage gated calcium channels. This inward flow of the calcium ions, it will make these vesicles, synaptic vesicles these are known as. So they contain certain chemicals known as the neurotransmitters. So these will be released and these will be carrying the signal. Whatever nerve impulse is brought over here, whatever signal is brought over here, it is transmitted from this presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron through the release of these neurotransmitters, which will actually go and bind to the receptors which are located on the postsynaptic neurons. So as a result of this, there will be opening of certain ion channels, say sodium ion channels, and there will be a change in the potential, and this signal will be transmitted to the second neuron. Okay, so this is what is happening at the junction. So neurotransmitters are the small molecules which are released and they will carry the signal from one neuron to another neuron. Okay, so this is how the information is relayed. Now this is the picture depicting the movement of the impulse from the neuron to an effector set. Say for example, in this case it is a skeletal muscle. Okay, so again in between the neuron and the skeletal muscle also there is a gap. There is no physical contact. Similarly, okay, so the signal which is brought over here, or the nerve impulse which is brought over here, again it will be carried to this skeletal muscles through the gap known as the synaptic cleft. Okay, over here. So again neurotransmitters will be released which will act on the receptors and it will transmit the signal. Okay, and this junction is known as neuromuscular junction. Okay, so this is how the signal is transmitted. Okay, that is an nerve impulse. It is transmitted towards the muscle. So it will, this neuronal action potential, it will get converted into an muscle action potential. I will not go much into detail with these processes. Now coming to our topic, that is the neurotoxicity. So with this brief introduction about the nervous system, it's highly difficult to cover the entire nervous system in just 10 minutes. So I've tried to focus on the important points which will be coming across in this particular topic, that is neurotoxicity. So let us begin with how the toxicity can be caused to the neurons. Okay, now basically these substances which are toxic to the neurons or the nervous system, these are known as neurotoxicants. Okay, now there are a number of ways by which these neurotoxicants can damage the nervous system. Okay, now there are certain neurotoxicants which can damage certain portions of the axons. Okay, maybe a part of axon may be affected without affecting the other parts of the cell, or sometimes the cell death may also take place, that is a neuronal damage may take place. Okay, so structural damage may be caused sometimes. The physiology or the function of the nervous system may get affected. Okay, so which part of the nervous system is getting affected, that is totally variable depending upon the type of neurotoxicant which is acting. Okay, so a particular neuron, it may be differentially vulnerable towards certain neurotoxicants, towards the toxic effects of certain neurotoxicants. So it is characteristic of that particular neurotoxicant. Now coming to the different types of damages which can be caused to the nervous system, out of which the first one is the membrane disruption. Okay, mainly the industrial solvents such as methanol, trichloroethylene, tetrachloroethylene, these are the ones which can damage the membrane. Now why it is damaging the membrane, or how it is damaging the membrane? That's because these agents, these are excellent cleaning agents, and these are the degreasers, okay, because of their lipophilicity, and for the same reason they can also be toxic towards the cell membranes of the neurons. They will start damaging the lipids in the cell membranes. That's how they can be toxic towards the neurons. So they will disrupt the membrane structure, because we have seen that there are a lot of phospholipids which are present. Mainly the membrane, it is a lipoidal in nature, right? So it can be damaged. Next example is the metals like lead, thallium, or triethylene. Okay, so these particular metals, they can damage the myelin sheath, the Schwann cells, right? They wrap around the axons, as we have seen, to form the myelin sheath. So myelinated neurons, these are basically getting attacked by these particular metals. So it will attack the myelin sheath, which can be damaged. So either direct damage to the myelin sheath may take place, or it may disrupt the functioning, that is their function may get affected. Okay, so structural damage to their membranes may take place, or the myelin sheath may take place. So as a result of this, the symptoms may be varying, maybe from the vision loss to the impaired cognition. Then the next example is the insecticides. Okay, so insecticides also can interfere with the membrane function. As I've told you earlier, that there are a lot of ion channels which will open as some stimulus is brought to that particular area. It will result in opening of certain ion channels, so that the ions will move across. So there is a particular balance between these extracellular and intracellular ions. So in case of these insecticides, they will hamper these ion channel function. Okay, so as a result of this, the distribution of these ions across the membrane will get affected. Say for example, organochlorine insecticide DDT, okay, that is dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane. So this was quite popularly used insecticides in the older days. You all must have heard this particular name also. So commonly it was used in maybe household use to get rid of ants or small insects or something like that. Okay, but later on it was found to block the ion channels and inhibit the active transport across these ion channels. So as a result of this, repolarization phase of the membrane potential, that was getting affected, of the action potential, repolarization phase. So there was persistent depolarization, as a result of which toxic effects like say tremors, seizures, or increased sensitivity towards the stimuli was taking place. So this was the basis for the toxicity towards the insects, but at the same time it was affecting the humans who are getting exposed to this DDT. So for the same reason, this has been banned in many of the countries. It is not available now even as an insecticide, because it can be dangerous to the human beings. Then the next type of toxic effect is on the peripheral sensory and the motor neurons. So periphery, that is in the peripheral nervous system, the sensory and the motor neurons may also get affected. So either abnormal sensation may take place. Okay, so sensory neurons, when they are getting affected, there will be abnormal sensation, or there may be impaired motor control. Okay, mainly in the distal region, say your finger, the control of the fingers may be lost. Okay, specifically in the hands and the feet. Okay, so in the periphery, either sensory or motor functions will get affected. Okay, but the advantage of this particular type of toxicity is that it can be reversible. Okay, because peripheral neurons to some extent they have capacity to regenerate even if they get damaged. So as a result of this, okay, it can result in the reversal if the exposure is reduced, okay, or if the exposure is totally cut off towards that toxicant, it can be reversible in nature. Okay, so some of the examples are quoted over here, mainly the solvents like methyl N-butyl ketone or N-hexane. Okay, these can exert their effects, after getting metabolized by the liver to some toxic substances. They may result in axonal swelling, okay, both in the motor as well as sensory neurons. Then the next type of toxicity to the nervous system is the permanent brain lesions. Okay, sometimes the neurons in the brain may get damaged. Okay, depending upon the area which is affected. Now, accordingly, the symptoms may be precipitated. So, either the sensory function may get affected, or cognitive functions, or the motor skills may be impaired, depending upon which area and what is the exposure which is taking place, or which type of toxicant is getting exposed. So, accordingly, either it may be less severe to it may be a more severe type of outcome which may be seen, or sometimes it may be even fatal also. The death of the person may also take place if it is quite severe. Okay, so these type of damage, that is a permanent brain lesion, as the name implies, it is an irreversible process. In case of peripheral nervous system, there is a little bit chances of regeneration, which is not the case with the brain lesions. If at all it takes place, it is mostly permanent and it is irreversible. Okay, now the classic example which may lead to brain lesions is the poisoning with the metal mercury. It may result in the permanent lesions in the brain. Now next type of toxicity is the anoxia. As the name implies, it is the absence of oxygen. Now as the nerves, they carry out a very important function. They are quite active, right, in constantly carrying certain signals. So they are metabolically quite active. So the metabolic rate of the neurons is very high. So as a result of this, they require a lot of oxygen supply, right? The oxygen supply to these neurons should be very good for them to carry out their normal functioning and to remove the waste material after the metabolic processes which are taking place in these neurons. Okay, so oxygen supply, if it gets affected, then it can be toxic to the neurons. Say for example, in case of poisoning with the carbon monoxide, it will compete with the oxygen for the hemoglobin, as we have seen in the hematotoxicity also, formation of the methemoglobin and all. Okay, so carbon monoxide, it will compete with the oxygen to bind with the hemoglobin, which is basically involved in the transport of the oxygen. So as a result of this, it will hamper the transportation of the oxygen. So as a result of which the oxygen supply to the neurons will get affected and the cells may even die due to anoxia. That is, total absence of the oxygen may result in the severe damage towards the neurons. So destruction of the neurons in the brain may take place, as a result of which it can also lead to some functional damage or even the death of the individual. Apart from this, so this is the mechanism followed by the carbon monoxide. There are certain other substances like cyanide or hydrogen sulfide. These also result in the damage of the nerves. Okay, but the mechanism is slightly different. They can irreversibly bind to the cytochrome oxidase, which is an essential component of the respiratory electron transfer chain. Okay, so energy supplementation is getting affected over here. Okay, then the next type of damage is the agents that can act on the synapse. So it's because of the certain chemicals which can act on the synapse, as we have seen that there is no direct contact between one neuron and another neuron, or one neuron and the effector organ. Okay, so at this synapse, these signals are carried by the neurotransmitters, as we have seen earlier. One of the important neurotransmitter is the acetylcholine. Of course, there are a number of neurotransmitters which are acting at the different systems under the nervous system. There are certain specific neurotransmitters present in the specific systems, right? Say for example, acetylcholine is mainly present in the parasympathetic system. Then the adrenaline or epinephrine or norepinephrine mainly, it is present in the sympathetic system of the autonomic nervous system. So likewise, there is dopaminergic system wherein dopamine is involved, serotonergic system wherein serotonin is involved, or GABA. There are a number of transmitters which help in transferring the signal from one neuron to another neuron, or maybe towards the effector organ. So likewise, one of the important transmitter is acetylcholine, okay, which basically is metabolized by this particular process. Acetylcholine, it is hydrolyzed in presence of this enzyme acetylcholine esterase to give acetate and choline. Acetate will be further broken down into water and carbon dioxide, and this choline, it is recycled. It is used again to synthesize fresh ACH molecules. Okay. Now, supposing if there are substances which can inhibit this enzyme, what will happen? It will hamper the metabolic process of the ACH. So, as a result of this inhibition of this enzyme, there will be potentiation of the action of acetylcholine or the ACH. By preventing the hydrolysis, it will result in increased amount of acetylcholine in that synapse. So there will be overstimulation of the postsynaptic cells. Okay, so it will have the deleterious effects. Obviously, continuous stimulation is also not good. Only up to the signal it should stimulate the postsynaptic neuron or the cells, right, or the effector cells. So likewise, the important toxic effects produced by the insecticides is by acting on this particular enzyme. Okay, say for example, organophosphates or the carbamates, they basically act by inhibiting this enzyme and potentiating the action of ACH. Okay, but as a result of this potentiating action, it becomes hazardous towards that particular insect and it kills that particular insect. But simultaneously, if the humans are getting exposed, it will start precipitating the toxic effects. Like say for example, organophosphates, okay, such as malathion and parathion. Okay, they can inhibit this particular enzyme irreversibly. That is, once this enzyme is blocked, it is permanently blocked until new enzyme is synthesized. Whereas carbamate esters like sevin or aldehyde, these are also inhibitors of this enzyme, but these are reversible in nature. So toxicity produced by organophosphates, it is quite severe, okay, as compared to the poisoning which is taking place due to carbamates. Another type of toxicity at the synapse is the inhibition of the neurotransmitter and the receptor antagonism. So no doubt by inhibiting the enzyme, ACH concentration will be increased. But at the same time, there are certain substances which can inhibit the neurotransmitter action, or they can even block the receptors on which these neurotransmitters are acting. Okay. Say for example, chlorinated cyclodines such as chlordane and endosulfane. These block the binding of this GABA, which is a neurotransmitter, gamma aminobutyric acid. It is an inhibitory transmitter. So this is blocked. Okay, its binding to the postsynaptic receptor is blocked by these chlorinated cyclodines. Okay, so as a result of which, again, toxicities like seizures, nausea, dizziness, and mood swings may be precipitated. Then carbon disulfide and DDT. It can inhibit the norepinephrine function. Manganese, it can inhibit serotonin, norepinephrine and dopamine function. Another common example is nicotine, okay, which is found in the tobaccos. Also in certain insecticides also this particular nicotine is present. So this nicotine, it is well known to act on the parasympathetic system. Okay, there are specialized nicotine receptors also which are found throughout the body. So as this nicotine amount is increased, it will result in increased stimulation of these neurotransmitters, of these autonomic systems and the neuromuscular junctions. So as a result of this, nicotine poisoning may take place, such as excitability, nausea, increased heart rate. These are the initial symptoms which can be seen, followed by muscle relaxation, decreased heart rate, and sometimes the patient may even go into coma, or even the person may die. So these are quite severe toxic effects of nicotine which may be precipitated. Okay. So this is to do with the different mechanisms and the types of toxicities. Now some of the examples of the drugs which can induce the toxicity to the neurons. So these include the amphetamines, which are used as CNS stimulant drugs. These can result in disorientation, confusion, and inability to concentrate. Okay. Then glucocorticoids. These may result in euphoria, the sense of well-being, restlessness, psychotic symptoms may get precipitated. Then benzodiazepines, these are used quite commonly as sedative, hypnotics, or anti-anxiety, okay, as tranquilizers, epileptics. So they may cause amnesia, that is a slight confusional state, or the dream-like state of the mind may get precipitated. Indifference to the surrounding may get created. Then the ethambutol, this can result in optic neuritis, that is the optic neuron may get, or the optic nerve may get inflamed over here. The toxicity we have also covered under the local toxicity. Then the phenothiazines, okay, which are used as antipsychotics. These may result in dystonic reactions. Muscle dystonia may be produced due to the damage towards the neurons, or the effect on the neurotransmitters. So these are some of the examples of drug-induced neurotoxicity. Thank you.